Well, welcome to a very special show on the A Trip to the Moon podcast. My name's Matt Jones, and it's one of those, I guess you could call it emergency podcasts after all the news that's broken over the last 48 hours or so. We've known for a while that Joe Tacopina was interested in Tranmere because he's been turning up at a few games, but we now have potentially a few more names of people who might be involved in the move as well, in ASAP Rocky and Rihanna. But the thing is, we don't know a great deal about the characters other than their names. So we've been reaching out to find a few people who may be able to shed a bit more light on them. And very shortly, we're going to hear from Corey Almond, who's written an article on Joe Tacopina and his spell at Spal. But before we get to that, let's hear from Nima Tavallaey, who is the co-host of the Italian Football Podcast. You can find them at EaterFootPod on all the usual social media channels, including X and YouTube. Nima, it's an absolute delight to have you on. And, well, we're speaking to you because you are someone who has spoken to Joe Tacopina himself. So can you shed a bit of light on the guy behind the name?
Well, I have interviewed him numerous times for the podcast. So that was before he bought Spal. He was in talks. The first time was when he was in talks to buy Catania, but that obviously fell through because Catania went bust. Then, of course, when he bought Spal, we've interviewed him quite a few times. He's a person who we know. I mean, Matt Rizzetta, who owns Campobasso, who are also in Serie C, referred to Joe as the founding father of Italian American investment in Italian football, and that's a very good way to describe Joe, because obviously he was involved with when Thomas Di Benedetto bought Roma, and he was vice president at Roma for a while. He's also been president at Bologna, Venezia, and of course now Spal. So, and if I remember correctly, he was the first football president in Italian football history to get that many promotions from all the way up to Serie B in a row, with Venezia and Bologna, which he oversaw. So yeah, I mean, I'd say this is someone who has a long history and long connection with Italian football, that even behind the scenes as well as a lawyer.
It is interesting to see the success that he's had. That does seem to be, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be quite short term. Then it's 2 or 3 years, and then he'll move on to another club and maybe replicate that success there, or, as the case has been at Spal, not quite replicates that success. Is that fair, that he sees clubs as maybe a 3 or 4 year project and then moves on to the next one?
Well, I don't know if I agree with that assessment. I mean, when you talk to Joe, he's long term. He's in it for the long term. That's the impression he gives, and that's what he tells you as well, that he actually wants to build something. But I think maybe at some clubs, with Venezia, or maybe without going into that, I mean, maybe he wasn't too interested in staying there because obviously Venezia is a very limited club in the sense that it's not that big of it's a very special place. I mean, the stadium takes about 5,000-6,000 people. You can't really grow something the way he wants to grow it. I think, at least that's the impression I've got when interviewing him through the years. With Spal and Ferrara, I know that he is very interested. At least every time I speak to him, he's very interested in getting them back to Serie A. He loves Ferrara, the city, which he thinks is he talks about it as a fantastic place. It's got lots of history. Spal, of course, Armando Picchi, the legendary Inter Milan captain of the 60s, came up through, played some of his football in Ferrara for Spal. So I don't think he's I think the Roma thing, he wasn't really an owner. He was more like an advisor, legal advisor, and he was involved in that way. I think in Bologna, the same thing happened there. He wasn't really an owner as such, I think, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But with Venezia and Spal, and of course Catania, who he wanted to buy, but that fell through because Catania went bankrupt, was because those were different projects. I think those are projects that he wanted to stay, especially Catania, because of course his family, I think he has a Sicilian heritage, so that was something he really wanted to do. But of course, when everything fell through because of the financial situation and the debt that club had, mainly to the tax authorities. He was unable to take over that. But no, my impression of him has always been that he's open. He wants to bring. He actually says this. He thinks Italian football is some of the most undervalued properties in business, and his vision, as he's told me every time I've interviewed him, pretty much is that, well, most Italian football owners traditionally buy football clubs for social currency purposes, and as he sees it, one does not have to exclude the other, because you should be able to use, because they're undervalued, you should be able to still manage the budget, keep a good revenue stream, and have sporting success, and also kind of do things in the community and help out, like he's done, for example, in Spal and Ferrara. He's been very involved with school children and the community there. So that alone suggests to me that he's not the kind of person who's just there for 2-3 years, at least not if he wants to own and run the club himself. Whether or not, I'm not aware about, I haven't really been following this story as it pertains to your club. How he's involved, if he's got an advisory role, or if he wants to run the club or whatever. But I know that when it comes to Spal and Venezia, he wanted to, with Spal especially, and his interest in Catania, it was to do something for a longer period of time.
Well, it's interesting that you pick up on a few things there. No one really knows what role he's going to have at Tranmere yet, because it hasn't been stated. It's more a case that we only know he's involved because he's been at games, and it'll be heartening for fans to hear that he is someone who will want to be in it for the long haul, because that would be one of the first fears, that I guess you might get an owner who would be there for 2 or 3 years and then move on.
I know that he's had Rihanna and ASAP Rocky as clients, because we have to remember, we are talking about one of the best criminal trial lawyers in the United States and in the world. He is a brilliant lawyer. And so I know that he's had them as clients. He's had pretty much every big name celebrity you can imagine as a client. So I have absolutely no information on what his role is, if it's an advisory role, or if he's coming in as part of the ownership group or as an investor. I have no idea about that. But what I can tell you is that when he has been the investor, when he has been the person who wants to own and operate and run the club, his vision has been to stay there for a longer period of time.
It's fascinating to hear. I'm imagining, Nima, that the words Tranmere Rovers haven't crossed your lips very often in your life, if at all. But can you tell me, has this story made any kind of splash, be it at Spal or in Italy at all?
I've not really seen that much. I'm not going to lie. I've not seen that much. I've seen like just this kind of like short, newsreel that, there's an interest or that he might be involved, but I've not seen anything more than that. No, so I can't say.
Because I'd be interested to know what the Spal reaction to it is, because I know that at the moment he isn't particularly popular there, is he?
Well, it's they, you want to do well. I mean, and you want, they were relegated from Serie B to Serie C, and of course last season they almost got, they managed to avoid relegation from Serie C. There were some trouble with the ultras there, who physically tried to attack him, and he's not the kind of guy who backs down. So he stood up for himself, which I think most people, if you know anything about the ultras and the criminal elements that dominate the ultras, you'd think you'd actually want to commend Joe for standing up to them and not taking, pardon my expression, shit from thugs. But as for the sporting project as a whole, well, I think he'd be the first to say himself that it's not been what he wanted it to be. His vision was to be back in the Serie A as soon as possible, to help grow Spal as a brand globally, connect with fans all over the world, and then maybe at that point sell it on or whatever. I don't know. But I think he himself would be the first to say that he's not happy with these results either, because we are talking again about an individual who is an overachiever. His professional career as a lawyer is a testament to that.
Would he have the capacity or want to run both at the same time, do you think? So let's say that he does, as we expect he has, come in and have an operating role at Tranmere. Is it going to be possible to do both Italy and England at the same time?
I think one thing Joe always does, and one thing we should remember is that he's very good at is he's got an incredible network. If he brings people in, if he's the kind of guy who wants to be like a CEO in the sense that he'll appoint people to run things, people he trusts and who are competent. And again, after having worked how he has for 20, 30 years, the contacts he has in Italian football. I mean, let's remember he appointed Daniele De Rossi as a coach when they were in Serie B, which was unheard of. That was a close personal friend of his. So he does know lots of, people in football at the highest levels. And I think that if he were to come in as an operative role, meaning owning Tranmere, he'd probably want to appoint someone who is an expert in their area more than him being there every single day, because let's remember, he is one of the most successful criminal trial lawyers in the United States alive today.
Maybe it's going to lead to the return of the Anglo-Italian Cup. That's what the dream is.
Well, I would
Tranmere's
love
only
that.
route to Europe.
I would love that, because that's one of my favorite tournaments that disappeared. I can't remember if I asked him about that, if last time I interviewed him, if he remembered that tournament. But yeah, I love that tournament. I think it's a classic Championship manager Serie B, lower league tournament that we all want back.
Certainly some Tranmere fans of a certain age who remember it fondly for their trips to Pisa and to Atalanta back in the early to mid-90s. Just before we let you go then, my impression on reading on social media from a Tranmere fan point of view is that they have made their own decision that Joe is negatively viewed upon in Italy because of what's happening at Spal. But my impression from you is that that's not the case, and that Spal may be one case, but his other clubs actually do have a positive view of him.
I mean, I think his track record speaks for itself. Like I said, what he did at Bologna, Venezia, leading them to being in charge when they were promoted both times. That's historic. That's never happened before. And he, if I remember correctly, he got them from, I could be wrong, but I think it was from Serie D to Serie C and Serie C to Serie B, and like 3 years in a running across two clubs, which is historic. So evidently he has had success. And again, he himself would probably be the first person to say that the Spal results are not what he wants, because he's an overachiever. He's very ambitious, and he's very passionate about what he does. That's probably the thing that when you interview him, it jumps out the page most at you, is he burns for everything he does. He cares about it, and he doesn't do things if he doesn't care for them, if he's not interested in them. But again, passion and competence are no guarantees in life. You can still fail. You can still not end up getting the results you want. That's just life for every one of us, regardless of who we are. So I do think that, yes, he's been very criticized in Spal, and again, I think he'd be the first one to admit that he probably deserves a lot of that criticism, because they're not in Serie A, they're in Serie C, and he wanted to return to Serie A ASAP. But again, to use that to negate everything else that he's done, or that he didn't try at Spal to get success, would be very, very unfair.
Fascinating to hear, and it's been great to get your kind of inside take on him, Nima. So if you want to hear more, I think you've got a few interviews, have him on your Patreon, haven't you? So go to EaterFootPod on social media to find out more details. Would that be correct?
Yeah, patreon.com/TIFP. And when people sign up, they can hit exclusive interviews. And then every single interview we've ever done is listed there, which includes, I think, 4 or 5 with Joe, as well as Roy Hodgson, Sven-Goran Eriksson. And today we published an interview with former Arsenal Invincible legend Laurent, who we interviewed, and we spoke to him about the Cup Winners' Cup games against Lazio and what he thinks of Calafiori and so on. So yeah, check us out.
Brilliant stuff. Go and find all of those interviews. And as I say, at EaterFootPod, ITA Footpod is the handle on social media. Nima, thank you for your time. It's been fascinating.
Good to be with you.
Okay, from the Italian Football Podcast, let's now get a fan perspective on things, but a respected fan at that, someone who you'll be familiar with, having appeared on this show, on your airwaves, on the BBC, on TalkSport, on many other broadcasters over the years as well. It's a very warm welcome back to the podcast to Nigel Adderley. Nigel, great to have you on. I know you've already been on TalkSport. I know you've been on social media giving your thoughts. So what is your take on the current situation, knowing as little as we may know?
Well, knowing what we know at the moment, I am sceptical because as someone who's been a fan of the club for over half a century and having seen the club nearly die twice in the 1980s, and on the second occasion it was when we were owned by an American attorney, Bruce Osterman, and we became the first ever club to go into administration. The one thing that I always prize as a Tranmere fan is stability. And I would probably say I put stability above success. I obviously want the club to be successful. I don't want us to be where we are now. And there's no doubt that we have had an on-field decline in the last 5 years. Since the demotion, you look at the league positions, and that is inarguable. But at the same time, I've known that in May, there will be a football team to watch in August. It at times may not be a very good football team, but we do have that stability given to us by the Palioses. And I think off the field, we are a well-run club from the point of view of a lack of debt, and that would make us attractive to a potential person looking to take over. Of course, we want the team to be in a higher division and playing better football. So at the moment, until we know more, I reserve judgment. I mean, I know a lot of people are excited, and I've been talking about the possibility of ASAP Rocky and Rihanna rocking up at the Clipper for a pint before the game and heading into the fan park if and when that's ever finished to maybe entertain the supporters. But the reality is, I know we heard Mark Palios talking this morning on Sky and on TalkSport. This does seem to be happening, but I think we need to know a good deal more. And as someone who always puts stability above everything else, I would like some guarantees about stability before maybe saying this is great and this is for the long-term future of the club. Because trying to do a Wrexham looks great on paper, and I can understand the logic of that, but doing it, I don't think will be easy.
Well, many teams have tried to do what Wrexham have done, and few have done it successfully. I mean, look at the amount of clubs who've had big foreign ownership, and there's only a few of them that have managed to swim. Some of them have treaded water, and others have sunk before that ownership has either A, ran out of money or just got bored of the whole thing. I know that you have had a little bit of criticism thrown at you for being negative, Nigel, but I think I'd probably be swaying more towards your point of view than the excited point of view. And I understand why people are getting excited, because what they've seen on the pitch for the last 3 years has been bland. And as you say, they've been going downhill as a football club. They've looked less and less likely to challenge to get out of this division through a promoted club as opposed to one going out the other way towards the National League. So I can understand why people are excited about that. But my key question, and it goes for any owner trying to buy any club, is always why. Why are you wanting to do this? I can't imagine that the words Tranmere Rovers have ever crossed the lips of Rihanna or ASAP Rocky until at some point this year. So why do they want to do it? What's in it for them? That's the information that I want to know, really, because it's our football club. We're the fans. We're the ones who go. We're the ones who want. We're the ones who, in a sense, have sustained them for the last 3 decades since the Peter Johnson money ran out, because they haven't been getting much money from elsewhere other than player sales, than tickets and merchandise and whatnot. So we're the ones that are there every week, and I think we do have that right to know.
Yeah, and that's a fair question. Why would anyone invest £50 million in a League Two football club in the fourth tier? If you were looking to invest money into a Premier League team, then clearly I can understand why, because you've got the huge revenue streams coming in. You've got a global platform in the world's most popular league, and whatever you do, you will be noticed if you are involved in a Premier League side. But we are Tranmere Rovers, and I know that Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney have done a brilliant job at Wrexham. I know that they were offering the project to other clubs before they alighted on Wrexham. Wrexham, of course, who were treading water in non-league, 15 seasons down there. Let's not forget that. Of course, they did the deal. they've put the money in, they've invested. The documentary has been a success for them, and now they have turned Wrexham into a money-making machine. They're going to the United States for summer tours, and they're selling out stadiums where the cheapest ticket is well over $50. So Wrexham are bringing money in now, in addition to the money that was put into their club by the Hollywood owners. But you look at them, they are Hollywood superstars, they've got that likability, and on the face of it, they are possibly different characters to Joe Tacopina and ASAP Rocky and anyone else coming in, because, of course, they had that cachet of being people who had instant likability, and maybe people obviously recognised them. I know Wrexham fans were suspicious, and even now, despite the success, there are one or two Wrexham fans who would prefer things to be maybe less of a circus, but they've made the circus work for them. I look at the record that Joe Tacopina's had in Italian football, and at best it's checkered. He's had success, but he's also had the situation with Spal, where he inherited a team in Serie B, the second tier, and at the moment they're towards the bottom of the third tier, and they could be going down again this season. And a lot of their fans aren't happy. And you could say, well, he went to other clubs in Italy and he was more of a success. He needs to tell us what he's going to do for Tranmere Rovers, both in the short term and, more importantly, the longer term. You could bring short-term success to a football club, and that would be great. And people love the instant hit. We live in an era dominated by short-termism now. Every game that's played has an air of finality about it, whether it's a league game in August or a promotion semi-final. Every game is treated the same. But we want to know what's going to be happening 5 or 10 years down the line. You know, when your kids are older, what are they going to be doing going to football matches? Will they still be going to watch Tranmere Rovers? I want my grandchildren, if I have any, to go and watch Tranmere Rovers in 15, 20 years' time. And those are the guarantees that I would like. He may not be able to give them, but we've got to have some idea of a long-term strategy. And I can see the attraction of bringing in big names, ASAP Rocky, Rihanna, whoever. You can bring that stardust in to really attract the investment maybe and make it watchable for general football fans and beyond on a documentary. But the nuts and bolts of running a League Two football club, I think, have to come first.
Do you think this kind of sale would have happened if Peter Johnson was still in charge? Because I recall several potential suitors being chased out of town by Peter Johnson because he just didn't feel that they were the right person. Now, we're in a different situation under Mark Palace than we were under Peter Johnson, because Peter Johnson could keep writing a cheque that was just about enough to sustain the club as a League One football club. And they eventually went down under his watch to League Two, but under his watch, he just maintained the status quo, basically, and was happy to keep them treading water until the right owner came along. He had the finances to do that. Mark Palios doesn't have the finances to do that. So I guess we are in a different position, and maybe it's a slightly unfair question, but it just feels to me like this kind of owner, like a Club 9, may well have been turned down by Peter Johnson.
Yeah, he wasn't too impressed when the club was sold on eBay, or certainly put up for sale on eBay for £10 million. So, and none of us were at the time. It made us a laughing stock. I mean, now we're not a laughing stock. Tranmere's been trending on social media. And when has that happened in recent years? Now, it's a lot of speculation, and a lot of people are staggered that a name like ASAP Rocky, who I've got to be brutally honest, I hadn't heard of until Sunday morning, that they're becoming linked with the club. Yeah, and when you read into his life, he's obviously been a huge success. But, you know, at the moment, he's on trial in Los Angeles, being defended by Joe Tacopina. So that's something that's in the background. Of course, he's pleaded not guilty, and he's innocent until proven guilty to the charges that have been put to him at the moment. But we've got to wait and see what happens there. And it just seems bizarre that Tranmere fans are looking on social media to find court details of something happening in Los Angeles. But that's where we are at the moment. I don't know if Peter Johnson would have done this. Of course, when Peter Johnson was trying to sell the club, something like Wrexham hadn't happened. And I think that the way it's gone with Wrexham, I think, has possibly changed the game as far as the potential ownership of Tranmere and a number of other clubs in the lower divisions are concerned. But my concern about that is Wrexham have done it. Wrexham have been in the documentary. They put money into the team. They've had success. Eventually, of course, they had their false start in the National League. They could be in the Championship next season. And it rolls on. They've got big money sponsors now. They've got United Airlines on their shirts. And clearly, they are a club who are heading in the right direction and have owners who seem to care. They're engaged with the process and everything there seems great. But that sort of chemistry doesn't happen all the time. It could happen with Tranmere. We could be sat here in 5 years' time and we could be looking back on the day that we became aware of Joe Tacopina and thanking him for what he's done for the football club. And if he does turn out to be our new owner, I really hope that's the case, because we'll be relying on him, and he needs to know, if he is the person in charge, just how much responsibility and history he will be in charge of. And he needs to be made aware of that very early on. And I hope that Mark Palios and the rest of the people involved in this, from Tranmere's point of view, are making that clear. We are not just another football club to us. This is everything to so many people. And we shouldn't just be used as part of something else to get somewhere else to the next place up the food chain for them. We have got to be treated with a good deal of care, and I hope they're aware of that.
How central is the ground and the big plot of land slap bang in the middle of Birkenhead? Well, not the middle of Birkenhead, but on the outskirts of Birkenhead to all this?
I think it's probably key to it, and I think that makes us a very attractive proposition for someone looking to invest, because you look at this figure of £50 million that's been mentioned. You look at the amount of land we have at Prenton Park. You look at the amount of land we have at the training ground. That's all owned by Tranmere Rovers. So we may not be cash rich, but we are asset rich for a club in our position. And there was some talk this morning, listening to Mark Palios, about a new stadium on the waterfront. I know we disagree about this. Personally, I think that a new stadium is the way forward. I've got an immense sentimental attachment to Prenton Park. It's where I saw my first game of football back in 1974. But if we want to continue, if we want to grow as both a football club and a business, I think we need to have a completely new stadium, because the main stand is no longer fit for purpose. It's an old building built in the 1960s. The other three sides of Prenton Park are 30 years old. It's ironic we're talking on the day we're playing Grimsby, because, of course, Grimsby Town at home back in 1995 was the day that the new Prenton Park was opened. But I get the feeling it was thrown up fairly quickly, and I think that we could have issues with the other three sides of the stadium in the short term as well. So I think we need an entirely new stadium to be viable as a long-term club, whoever the owners are, to have an amenity that's available 7 days a week, better corporate facilities. I think that that's where we need to be. If Bidston is the preferred venue, I know a lot of fans have their misgivings about that, but I do think in the short term, i.e. the next 5 or 10 years, we need to move on. And I'm sure that the prospect of a new stadium has been discussed and would make us fairly attractive.
Just finally then, Nigel, I guess it's a case of knowing that if this takeover goes through, and it very much looks like it will, from Mark Palios and what he said, and I know he says there are NDAs in place, but then he does name drop the two people who are primarily involved alongside Joe Tacopina in Rihanna and ASAP Rocky in the interview with TalkSport. So we can assume to a degree that they may well be involved. If that takeover goes through, the club as we know it now is going to be a very different club to the one that it becomes in a year, 3 years, 5 years. Wrexham now is a very different club to what it was 3-5 years ago. And we just have to hope that it's not a case of Tranmere selling their soul for some quick success to make some quick money for someone else. And it's more a case of actually these people are in it for the long haul and they do have a dream of being a success in British football.
Yeah, and it has to be for the long haul, whoever it is. If we had back-to-back promotions and then 5 years' time we had real issues, there's no point in that. I know some people would say, well, look, any success is better than no success, but we have to have something that's going to be standing the test of time, because we are the only professional football club on the Wirral, and that's our part of the country, and that's got to be protected, I think, at all costs, and maybe at the costs of having the sort of success that people may want. They may look at Wrexham; they could have a triple promotion. I would rather the football club be around in 10 years than maybe have that rapid success. Obviously, I want some success, but I think that we have to hope that the club will be in the right hands. I think it's significant that this golden share issue has been agreed over the last couple of weeks or so. And listening to Mark Palios this morning, he went into some detail about what that may involve, not moving the club to more than 5 miles away from its current base, protecting the kit, protecting the club crest. And I think that those things are very important. I think the heritage of the club has to be protected. And I think that if he remains for a couple of years or for as long as he can, I think that's a good thing, because I think it's too much of a risk for us, bearing in mind what's happened in the past, to make a complete leap into the unknown and rely on people that we know very little about. And I think that some continuity is very important. But hey, look, if Joe Tacopina is the man and he's the best owner we've ever had, then brilliant. I'll be the first to say I was wrong, and I was wrong to have any misgivings. But at the moment, there is uncertainty. And I think when there is uncertainty, we've had all the conspiracy theories that have been trotted out on social media, which is inevitable. But I think more importantly, people care about their football club. And at the moment, people will worry where the football club is going. And we need that reassurance. We need that reassurance basically from the people who are there now. And they need to basically tell us, look, when we are no longer in total control, the club will still be protected. It will still be your club. And to a certain extent, it will still be the same club, but it may be slightly different. It may be packaged slightly differently.
So much is up in the air. We will see what happens. Nigel, great as always to get your point of view. I'm sure at some point in the near future, you're going to be back on when the emergency podcast finally happens, when the takeover is announced. So thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, Matt. Thanks a lot.
So that was Nigel Adderley. And now let's move on to another person who knows a little bit about Joe Tacopina then, because if you go on backpagefootball.com, you'll find an article from September the 24th of this year entitled "Spal's Demise Under Joe Tacopina Spells Potential Danger for Tranmere Rovers." That's written by football writer Corey Almond. And Corey joined us on the show. Corey, great to have you on. Thank you for joining us all the way from Canada, where you are at the moment, I believe. So we're going overseas, which is a rarity for the A Trip to the Moon podcast, but might not be a rarity for Tranmere very soon if the stories that we hear are to be believed. So tell us a little bit about Spal under Joe Tacopina then, because you're a little bit of an expert. You certainly know more than we do here in England anyway.
Well, Tacopina joined Spal in August of 2021, following the previous owner, which was the Colombarini family. They, COVID and issues with the stadium. They were looking for new investment. They couldn't afford to keep the club, at a good level anymore. They'd just been relegated from Serie A, so it was a new time for Spal. They traditionally are a Serie B, Serie C team, so their stint in Serie A was very unexpected. They quickly climbed from Serie C to Serie A amid being reformed in 2013. They are Spal 2013. They've been reformed many times. Many times, 3 or 4 times, which is a lot for one club. The latest being a merge with another local team. But Tacopina came in and, said within 15 months, I think it was he cleared 15 million of debt, or he came into 50 million of debt that he said he'd, dealt with. But Tacopina came in with investors, as he did with Bologna, Roma, Venezia, usually an American-led kind of financial vehicle that all different operational jobs within that consortium. And previously, Tacopina's been kind of accused of not having great operational duty at any of the clubs that he's been at. So at Roma, for instance, one of his former colleagues accused him of never having any operational duty at Roma. Tacopina takes credit for, Roma's success during his time. They were never, world beaters. They never won the Champions League, but his time there was deemed a success in his eyes. And then he goes to Bologna, who's owned by a Canadian billionaire, Joey Saputo, a dairy part of the so-called dairy mafia in Canada. Falls out with him. I'm not sure his exact duties at Bologna, but it was short-lived anyway. And then he finds himself at Venezia, where promotions are a very successful time there. Promotion from Serie D to Serie A. Again, he leaves. No real reason to why he left, but very vague reasoning. But within a few months, fans kind of turn on the American owners. So did he know something that the others didn't? I'm not sure. But, Venezia are back in Serie A now. So all's not lost there. So then he comes to Spal. And as I said before, takes over from a well-known family who have been at the club for a while and saw the rise of Spal, the most recent rise. And seems as if he's taken a more hands-on role here for the first time. Initial investment was done by bringing in players, Rajan Golan, former Belgian international, Daniele De Rossi as manager, and the eighth. they've had 8 managers since Tacopina took over in 2021, which isn't surprising in this day and age, and especially not in Italy, but it's still a high number. And De Rossi was part of that, seen as kind of the financial hallmark of Tacopina, trying to assert himself to fans, saying, I've got money and I'm willing to spend. He also signed a player who some might know, Giuseppe Rossi, who is a well-known figure, but aging. None of these guys worked out. Serie B, when Tacopina took over, that relegation soon came, and now they find themselves in Serie C. Fans have already turned, but it seems too late. And everyone will always say, if a team's doing well, people don't look at the ownership, but there are serious problems at Spal, and when those problems arise, people start to see what's going on, at the top. And with Tacopina, he lacks any kind of personable attitude that you want from an owner. He's chaotic. He's fairly unrealistic. He promised Serie A when he joined, and they're now 18th in Serie C. And recently, their last game, they played Pescara. They lost 1-0. Before the game, there were protests by fans who threw fireworks, and riot police showed up. So it's very troubling times. And my article, I don't know tons about Tranmere, but I unfortunately am a Portsmouth supporter, so I know the cost of bad ownership or the wrong ownership. Tacopina, there's no doubt that he can bring money in, but 2-3 years down the line, he could just pack his bags and say, I'm out of here. And I know that it's Mark Palios, the owner at the moment at Tranmere. I think I'm right in saying there's kind of talk that he can't really finance the club any more than he's doing, but there's a consistency and I can't speak for Tranmere fans, but maybe a transparency that he offers now that maybe is underappreciated. Tacopina's complete other end. It's chaos, and you really don't know what the future will hold with Tacopina. So yeah, I'd be worried, but there's a flip side to everything. So
we'll see what happens. Corey, it's been a pleasure chatting to you. So thank you so much for getting in touch. Oh, well, thank you very much for getting back to us when we put the request out. For anyone who does want to go and read the article, it's on backpagefootball.com. Basically, I found it by typing in Joe Tacopina Tranmere, and it came up fairly quickly on Google. But backpagefootball.com is the website, and just have a search for Joe Tacopina and we'll find it on there. Thank you to all the guests who've come on the show today. Thank you to all of you who are listening, and well, we will see what the future holds.